Star Explorers look so cool, but is it any good? Let's find out. Star Explorers is a flip and write game for 1 to 4 players. Actually, if you have multiple copies, you can play with 8 or 12 or even 16. The sky is the limit. Just came up with that one. Players will assume the roles of astronomy enthusiasts who will spend hours staring at the sky looking at different constellations. But don't you worry, Star Explorers only takes roughly 30 enjoyable minutes. Players will be using their dry erase markers, chalk markers? I don't know what kind of markers these are. They're white though. It's pretty cool. Players will be using their markers to draw constellations on their rotating map boards. That's right, you heard me right, rotating map boards. These things are freaking cool, look at that. At the beginning of each of the 6 rounds, you do need to make sure that your little arrows are pointing to each other for the correct round orientation. And really, the way these white markers look on these black boards is so cool looking. Like, it looks so cool. I love these things. Except for, actually the erasers on them kind of suck. Nothing a good old finger can't solve. Or maybe the eraser works better once it gets all like gross looking, maybe? I don't know, I may have just discovered that. Interesting. During setup, players will receive a randomized set of these constellation cards. They'll get a 5, a 6, 2 7s, 8, 9, and 10. And at the beginning of each of the 6 rounds, one player will be the first active player, and they will choose one of these constellation cards, and everyone at the table will choose that corresponding constellation card number, and that will determine what constellation each player is drawing. And there's a whole bunch of these, like, there's a whole box full of them, so it does keep the gameplay fresh and it feels different every time you play it. Yes, you have the same limitations and restraints, however, the constellations are definitely going to be different every time. So for instance, if I was the first active player, maybe I chose this one here, I will take that tile and I will flip it face up and put it underneath the star token here. Actually, in future rounds, this star token will be covered by the previous round's constellation card, and then you will choose the new one and put it face up underneath it. What this is doing is creating a unique scoring combination every round. So in this example, I will get 1 point for every white star in this constellation that I draw, and I will gain 2 victory points for every yellow star on this constellation. But after the constellations are set, each player must then draw that constellation within the viewing window on their map boards. They're not allowed to rotate it. You can only draw on these stars that are visible. However, should a player not be able to fit the constellation or all of its stars on this section of their map board, they don't have to, but for each star that they are unable or unwilling to put on their map board, they have to cross off one of these faded stars. And that will wreck your score at the end because each faded star is essentially costing you 3 victory points. So let's see, if I'm trying to add this constellation here, I get 2 points for yellow and 1 point for white. And actually, if I'm able to join a yellow to a white, I will gain 3 points. So I think I'm gonna go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There we go. That's gonna be my constellation there. So here I check how many points did I get for the white stars. I got 1, 2, 3 points for the white stars, and then 2 points for every yellow. So I got 2, 4, 6 points for those. And then I get 3 points for each connected yellow to white. So there's a connection for 3, there's a connection for 6, there's a connection for 9. Not too shabby, really. And then I tally those up, what was that, 15, 18 points? And I write down my 18 points down there on round 1. Now, when you're making these constellations, the lines in the constellations cannot cross other constellations, and you can't share stars within different constellations. And I'm gonna say the word constellations a lot in this review. Then once all players have completed that constellation, they rotate their boards 1 notch clockwise, ensuring that those 2 little arrows line up for the correct round. So now I take the constellation card that we just did and put it face down on top of that star. Now the next first player will choose another number, and remember these numbers on here tell you how many stars are in that constellation. So maybe the next player chooses 5. So then I take my 5 card, I put it face down underneath, and now I'm gonna get 2 points per yellow star and 2 points per white star, and 4 points for every time a white star is connected to a yellow star. I'd like to pause for just a moment, and Harley here would like to remind you that this was a review copy provided by the publisher. However, the thoughts and opinions of this are our own. But Harley's a dog, so her opinion really doesn't have that much weight. But anyways, please consider clicking that subscribe button. Thanks. Now, as you can see, this board starts to fill up pretty quickly. So you kind of want to be careful where you're squeezing in your constellations, and occasionally, maybe a player has been a little more conservative with their space on their map board, and then they'll choose the 10 constellation, and you're like, I'm gonna wring your neck. Why would you choose the 10? There's no room on my map board for that. And you'll just have to have a bunch of faded stars and then just squeeze it in where you can. Just like in life. Just squeeze lemons when life gives you juice or something. I don't know. It's late. But after 6 rounds, at the end of the game, players will tally up points left over from non-crossed out faded stars. They'll tally up the points from all 6 of the rounds, and players will also gain 1 point per star adjacent to the sun in the center of their map board. Players will also gain 2 victory points for each line they draw across this line here, this elliptic in the center of their map board. Players will also gain 3 victory points per star that they used on the outermost region of their map board. Those stars have a slight bluish glowing hue to them to make them stand out just a little bit more, and kind of acts as a reminder as you're playing, like, hey, if you could use this star, it'll get you some extra points. And I've found sometimes it might be good to maybe miss a star or 2 if you're able to just spam some of those outer stars real good, if you can get like 9 points off of 3 of them in a row. But I'm also not very good at this game, so maybe not take advice from this guy. But just tally up your points, and the player with the most points wins. So that is Star Explorer in a nutshell. I really dig the overall aesthetic of this game. It looks super cool, and the way those white markers look on the shiny black star maps looks so awesome. I will say though that the markers are a little hard to erase. However, if they were easier to erase, I imagine when you were rotating them in your viewfinder thing, that it probably could wipe off. And I guess that would be kind of a big problem. So I guess I can't really gripe too much about that, but it does seem that maybe after the erasers get primed or something, they did seem to erase a little bit better, or maybe it was just atmosphere or something like that, or a good paper towel will take care of it too. So anyways, the white markers look awesome on those black starboards. And while we're doing little nitpicks at the beginning of this review, the game does have a little bit more of a solo experience feel to it overall. Yes, you and other players will choose what number of constellation cards you're using. However, it still feels like there's not a whole lot of player interaction in this game, but it is very enjoyable. I will say, I've enjoyed playing this game solo on the couch because you can just have your little map board sitting in your lap and just go to town doodling. Actually, I have played it with the wife. Both of us sitting on the couch. It's pretty cool. We just sit with the little console in between us, and we have our cards there and just flip them, and she beats me every time at the game. But it's a really chill, enjoyable game. Or it's kind of a nice puzzle that feels different every time you play it. I know it's still just constellations, but there's so many different constellations, and they'll always end up coming up in different orders too, so it never really feels the same. Yes, it's technically the same puzzle that you're trying to solve, but it's with different pieces every time. The production value though, the tiles are nice and thick, the art on them, everything just looks really nice. And the rotating map boards, super cool. It's just a really neat idea for a flip and write. A fresh change to the whole flip and write genre. Especially with the way that the previous round card affects this upcoming round with what stars you're gonna try to connect or which stars are gonna score you points. So sometimes when you're the active player that's choosing what card you're going to use next, you may rotate your board, assess the situation, maybe like what stars you have available to you and which ones you're going to link, and sometimes that will kind of dictate which constellation card you choose next, sometimes it might not always be the best star count, but say you got a lot of white next to blue, perhaps, then maybe you will choose constellation cards that will have white connecting to blue. So that way you can try to spam those connections and get as many points as possible. But it's also nice that they threw in those kind of, I guess, universal scoring things, like the points for around the star or the extra points for using the stars on the outside borders of the maps, and the points for crossing that line, I forget what it's called, in the center of the map. Those are just kind of like the little cherry on top, a little something extra to think about when you're placing your constellations. Overall, the game's super easy to teach. It's really like 20 or 30 minutes of an enjoyable puzzle. Can't recommend this one enough. Definitely staying in my collection. I'm gonna give this one a 4 out of 5. This one was super enjoyable, really like the overall look of it, and any game that I can enjoy from the couch while halfway paying attention to Squid Games or something is totally dope. So that is Star Explorers by Queen Games. Definitely check that one out.